A fresh warning from Moscow has reignited fears over nuclear tensions in Europe, with Russia signaling that another nation may now be in its crosshairs. Russia says a recent decision by a neighboring country has fundamentally changed its security calculations. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has issued a sarcastic but ominous warning following a major defense policy shift. Moscow claims the move has placed a new country on its list of potential nuclear targets. The latest exchange has once again raised questions about the growing confrontation between Russia and NATO. Dmitry Medvedev says Finland is now among the countries Russia could consider potential nuclear targets. He linked the warning directly to Finland's decision to permit the import of nuclear weapons onto its territory. In a post on X, Medvedev sarcastically told Finland to rejoice, saying it had reached what he called peak security. Dmitry Medvedev said, and I quote, "Finland has lifted its ban on hosting nuclear weapons. What does that change for the Finns? Just one minor thing. Their country is now on Russia's nuclear target list. Rejoice, Finland. You've reached peak security." Unquote. The warning followed the Finnish parliament's approval of legislation allowing the import of nuclear weapons. The measure, introduced by Finland's government, was formally passed by lawmakers on June 17th. Medvedev's comments represent the latest escalation in Russia's nuclear rhetoric directed at NATO countries. Finland joined NATO in 2023, ending decades of military non-alignment in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russian officials have repeatedly warned that NATO expansion would trigger what they describe as necessary countermeasures. So far, however, the Kremlin has announced no changes to Russia's official nuclear doctrine following Medvedev's remarks. Finland has approved a major legal change allowing the possible deployment of nuclear weapons on its territory, marking a significant shift in its national security policy. Finnish President Alexander Stubb signed amendments to the country's nuclear energy legislation, formally approving the changes passed by lawmakers. The updated law is scheduled to take effect on July 1st, introducing new rules regarding nuclear-related activities under Finland's revised security framework. The amendments now permit the import, transit, supply, and storage of nuclear weapons in Finland under approved arrangements, removing previous restrictions. Earlier this month, Finland's parliament voted to end the decades-old prohibition on nuclear weapons, reflecting the country's changing defense priorities. Finnish Defense Minister Antti Häkkänen said the previous ban no longer aligned with Finland's responsibilities as a member of NATO. Häkkänen argued that the updated legislation would allow Finland to fully participate in NATO's nuclear deterrent strategy and collective defense structure. He also criticized opponents of the measure, saying their resistance was based on security assumptions that no longer matched the current geopolitical environment. The decision comes roughly 3 years after Finland ended its long-standing military neutrality policy and joined NATO, largely in response to changing security concerns in Europe. The Finnish parliament voted 125 to 61 to allow NATO nuclear weapons to be stored on Finnish territory if required. The June 17th move ended a Cold War-era restriction that had barred nuclear explosives from Finnish soil for decades. Helsinki stressed that it does not plan to develop its own nuclear weapons, but wants greater flexibility within NATO. Heikki Auto said, and I quote, "The nuclear deterrence is, in the end, the guarantor of peace in Europe. It's the ultimate deterrence against Russian aggression." Unquote. Finland joined NATO in 2023 shortly after Russia launched its full-scale war against Ukraine. The decision came as Russian forces expanded military infrastructure and established new bases near the Finnish border. Despite its relatively small population, the Nordic nation maintains one of Europe's strongest and most capable militaries. Finnish soldiers have also helped train other Western troops in operating and fighting under Arctic conditions. Earlier this year, Finland announced higher defense spending amid concerns about the deteriorating regional security environment. Critics warned the policy shift could increase tensions with Moscow and make Finland a potential military target. The Kremlin has repeatedly warned that any deployment of nuclear weapons in Finland would trigger a Russian response. Remember, Finland's position as a NATO member carries added significance because the country shares a 1,340-kilometer border with Russia, placing it directly along one of Europe's most sensitive security frontiers. The Kremlin had previously warned Finland against removing its long-standing restrictions on nuclear weapons, arguing that the policy change could create new risks in the region. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the decision could contribute to rising tensions across Europe, as Moscow closely monitors changes in Finland's defense posture. Peskov warned that if Finland's actions were viewed as a threat to Russia's security, Moscow would respond by taking what he described as appropriate measures. On Finland's move to repeal the nuclear ban, the Kremlin spokesman said that it could lead to an escalation of tensions on the European continent. By deploying nuclear weapons on its territory, Finland is beginning to threaten us. And if Finland threatens us, we will take appropriate measures. Unquote. Russia's embassy in Helsinki said that even a theoretical deployment of nuclear weapons in Finland will be closely monitored and taken into account by the Russian military. Moscow's representative at the United Nations in Geneva warned that any placement of nuclear weapons on Finnish territory would be considered a direct security threat by Russia. Russian diplomat Gennady Gatilov said such a development would force Moscow to consider what he called compensational countermeasures in response to the changing security situation. Gatilov also questioned whether the move would actually improve the safety of NATO countries, saying he doubted that increasing nuclear capabilities would bring greater stability. The latest warnings come as Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a serious message directed at NATO, highlighting the growing tensions between Moscow and the alliance.
Today, Russian officers and soldiers are courageously and effectively performing their duties during the special military operation. They are liberating our historic lands and defending our people. I am confident that you will prove yourselves worthy of the honorable title of Russian officer and do your utmost to uphold the glorious traditions of our armed forces. I would like to emphasize in particular how important it is to continue to learn the achievements of military science and to develop professionally throughout your service. The prominent military theorist General Mikhail Dragomirov once said that a leader who is dedicated to their cause must keep learning, because without knowledge there can be no victories. Dear friends, you are about to begin your service and take command of military units, divisions and formations during these challenging times. The current situation in the world is far from stable. Military confrontation in the Middle East continues unabated. The potential for conflict has risen significantly in a number of regions around the world, including in Eurasia. We see that if earlier NATO countries limited themselves to supporting the Kiev regime, which came to power through illegal armed means and a coup d'état, they are now openly saying in the West that they are preparing for war with us and are increasing their defense budgets. To justify this spending and the radical militarization of their states, NATO and European Union leaders continue, as before, to resort to false claims about an alleged military threat from Russia. The modus operandi of the so-called democratic West is very simple. First, they create threats against our country, forcing us to take the necessary measures for self-defense and protection, and then immediately accuse us of all mortal sins to justify their continued aggressive policy and actions against Russia. We know this all too well. Even after the treacherous attack on the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, and it was indeed treacherous, the West, Hitler's Germany, attempted to accuse the USSR and Stalin of aggression against what we would today call the collective West. Surprisingly, this is still being discussed in quasi-scientific circles. I would like to emphasize that Russia has consistently advocated for equal and indivisible security for all. 318, we are convinced that this can only be achieved by establishing a multipolar system of international relations and reliably ensuring the military security of every state. At the same time, we are prepared to respond promptly and appropriately to any external or internal threats.